Planning an event and wondering how you can give your attendees the best experience possible? Take advantage of customized meetings with Hilton that make it easier than ever to incorporate health, wellness, and great breaks. Hilton will help you build an extraordinary meeting that attendees will remember. To book your next meeting or event, go to meetings.hilton.com.
Are you a
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna be
Welcome to Gather Geeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth, here we are. Another Gather Geeks, another week.
Our guest today is Erica Boeke. She's Vice President of Experiential at CNX, the in-house creative agency at Condé Nast. At CNX, she leads a team that executes events on behalf of Vogue, Vanity Fair, GQ, Bon Appetit, and other titles, as well as creates new events separate from the brands, which we will hear more about in a moment. Marquee events include the Glamour Women of the Year event, the New Yorker Festival, Wired Business Conference, the new Team Vogue Summit, and others. She's going to talk about conceiving and evolving events, how her team works from strategy to execution, trends she's tired of, and some new directions. David, Erica described how Condé Nast, like other media properties, has shifted its mindset from thinking of events as add-ons to now living in what she calls the golden age of events.
Absolutely. We're in this living journalism. This is live journalism for the most part. And it really is the centerpiece of a lot of things that are happening at these big brands and these big media companies.
Something we're going to hear about is how CNX brainstorms new events. And the question isn't necessarily what's the best way to showcase our brand. The question is what is lacking in the event world and what do people want to go to? It's really this audience first question that isn't narrowly defined by one title or one magazine.
Yeah, I know. I love it. Like we used to talk about mobile first. That used to be the buzzword, and audience first is kind of a brilliant way of looking at it. And they're trying to fill the niches that need to be filled. I mean, people's attention are the most precious thing that we have.
And when you tap into that, you're creating a brand in itself for that event, but it's a way to fold others in, and it's responding to what people want. They want to be there, and so you're tapping into this ready-made audience.
It's listening at its finest to what people want.
So let's take a listen.
So Condé Nast is one of the most amazing brands that we know. And it says quality, it says influence, it says everything that you can say that's fantastic. And you got this great job. What is your job, and tell us how much you love about it, and what have you learned from the journey that you've been there for a few years?
Yes, I've definitely been here for a few years. You know, first of all, thank you. That's so nice to hear. And it is an iconic brand, you know, and I think it is one of these things that I kind of grew up looking up to this brand, and certainly everyone that works at Condé Nast kind of feels that pride of the influence that our editorial has, and that, you know, we've been able to really create culture there, and that it feels amazing.
And you touch millions and millions of people with the brand.
Absolutely.
I mean, how many people would you say is your sort of ballpark number that you influence? That you touch? I mean, it's in multi-millions.
Oh, yes.
And so it's the kind of thing that you have a responsibility in the event side to really make sure that you're not wasting people's time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, we had chatted about this, that, you know, the stakes are high. The quality, the authority from our editorial teams are there. So my job as, you know, VP of Experiential at Condé Nast.
What a great title.
I mean, my gosh.
Is that the best title?
It is. Sometimes
you know?
I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, it really is the dream job. And it's, you know, I didn't start off primarily in experiential. I started off in marketing, but experiential was such a huge part of what we always did at Condé Nast. Events have always been in our DNA. When you go back to, you know, the Vanity Fair Oscar party, the Met Gala, the New Yorker Festival, Women of the Year, Men of the Year, you know, events have always been a big part of what we did as our marketing strategy. But I think moving into now, which I really feel is the golden age of experiential. You know, I've had events be a part of my repertoire for my entire 20 plus year career. However, you know, it was kind of regarded as this nice little add-on. And now I think with the power of the convening power, that technology has. Like we went through this phase where events were kind of, events were cast aside in lieu of digital, right? Everyone wants to be on their screens and, so digital. But then it came back to people really craved to have time together. And then technology just amplifies that. So as marketers, you're looking at your ability to really, transform people and make them feel a certain way, and then to layer technology on top of that and amplify that is a immensely powerful thing.
Explain what that means in terms of what it means in terms of using technology to amplify. Is it are you talking social media?
Social media, yeah. We just did our first experiential upfront at Condé Nast a couple weeks ago, and I kind of set it up with some really great, facts about why this is the golden age of experiential. And I think, first of all, it's no doubt that we all are craving this in person, these experiences. They make us, in fact, 70% of the people surveyed, and this was through Event Marketer, I'm not going to take credit for it, but they said 70% of, I believe it was, millennials feel that experiences make them feel more connected to the world. I think that, technology kind of drove us into our own little secluded worlds, but then we felt very isolated. It's human nature to want to connect. And I think by creating these really meaningful experiences, we allow people to connect again. And, but adding social media onto that, we're also allowed to connect, but then also create a little FOMO, which let's admit, that's a big part of why people want to experience these things, to show their network that this is what I'm up to. This is who I am. So by putting them in these really interesting settings or having really interesting conversations with people, we're helping people define who they are as individuals. So that's a very powerful tool. And, as marketers look to connect with consumers, by allowing people to experience your brands and then allowing those ambassadors to share that across their networks, then you have their network, which is left feeling much more positively about your brand through the original influencer.
I mean, it seems as though that the reason that budgets for events have gotten bigger is because you're now not talking to the people in the room, but you're talking to thousands outside the room. Oh, so absolutely. It justifies an ROI. Is that correct?
Yeah, it goes back to, look, we have to all go back and say, how does this warrant the spend? And it does allow for that amplification that allows us to, to reach those dollars. However, I think as the, with the creative lens, what we're doing here is really special and it's really pushing the culture forward. I mean, you look at how experiences, you have obviously watched the chronicling of this, of the evolution of how experiences have changed. It's just, and what I love about this moment right now, I was on a panel in Chicago with Albie from 29
I love
Rooms.
Albie,
yes,
yeah.
love him. Love you, Albie. Hope you're listening. So we were on this panel together and everyone was like, are you guys competitors? And I said, thank you, Albie, for making my phone ring off the hook for saying, hey, what's our version of 29 Rooms? And he's like, oh, well, thanks. I guess my invitation to the Met Gala got lost in the mail. And, but we make each other better. We just keep pushing each other. And that to me is what it's all about. And I think as events people, we just love doing cool shit. And we just want to do cool shit with other cool people, push it forward.
But go back. I mean, one thing about Condé is that the brands are so well known. I call it kind of people have a parasocial relationship with a brand. It's a fictional character, but it's their best friend. When I get a magazine, I would open a Vanity Fair and I would live it and breathe it. And it got me excited in terms of my being able to be excited.
Right.
And so when you bring a magazine to life I think it's a double-edged nicety in a sense to be representing events for these kind of brands though, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the kind of thrilling thing about my job, working across all of them, for instance, right now in any
explain what your job is.
So here's my job.
Let's go back. Tell everybody what you did.
Yes.
Tell your mother what you did.
Oh my gosh, Mom. So, So as I kind of mentioned earlier, I have been head of marketing at various Condé brands, everything from Wired to GQ to Condé Nast Traveler to Gourmet, rest in peace. So I'd headed up marketing for these various brands, but now in this kind of I work at our in-house agency. So I work across all of the brands. I also work on behalf of clients. So I'd say 50% of my job is working on behalf of clients, coming up with concepts for them, white label concepts. And then the other half is working on behalf of our brands. So I don't work on every single tent pole in the building because I would be dead and my team would be dead. But we do work, we basically help incubate kind of new concepts, help the brands launch them, and then we move on and we are, working on incubating some really interesting ideas that are independent of the brand. So again, it's the dream job. But in any given day, like for instance, today, I started the day with a, status meeting on Wired 25. We're doing the 25th anniversary of Wired, a takeover of San Francisco. That's coming up this October.
Oh my God, that sounds so cool.
Oh, it is cool. It is cool.
Oh, can you give us any hint?
Yes.
Okay, tell us what you're going to do.
We're kind of calling it, what are we calling it? Business in the front, party in the back? No, we are doing a full day of, taking people to work immersions. We're taking people behind the scenes at the new Salesforce Tower. We're taking people into our own offices. We're hopefully having a sneak peek of some very exciting new facilities out in San Francisco, which I can't reveal, but you can read between the lines. Then Saturday and Sunday are more of a festival feel. We are doing everything from a gathering of the, world championship paper airplane team to, infinite beers with different conversations of, your stage is the bar, to really interesting people having a beer together, audience checking them out. And then one person will leave the bar, and then another person will come on, and those two people will have a conversation. So really interesting kind of formats. And then Monday of the week, it's October 12th through the 15th. Monday the 15th is kind of our Wired Business Conference on steroids. And it is every whale you've ever heard of. We are starting the day with a conversation between Johnny Ive and Anna Wintour, which is going to be incredible. So anyway, tell me when you're airing this, because I have to make sure that that's public before I'm giving you a sneak peek.
We'll make sure.
But anyway, that one is a dream. And, I had worked at Wired, so I feel like, having worked at Condé, for so long, I have such a passion for each of these brands, and I know the lens that they look at.
So the Wired things, how many people are involved in that event, and how do you get in? How does one get invited, or do you pay to go?
Right. So it's a ticketed event.
Okay.
So you're all welcome to go to wired.com/25. Okay. And I think that's, the ticket sales aspect is something that we're really experimenting with. The Friday work immersion days, the weekend ticket is like, that's 50 and under. And then the Wired Business Con, that is the heavier. I think we have a discount on that one going at I think we're starting at, it's over $1,000, but it's, I want to say we're going at 1993 because that was the year that Wired was founded. So we went for 1993 was a ticket price that we were looking at for the all access. So, they range because we want to get that C-suite person who is, wanting to go to the business conference.
But it is that Wired personality. When I went to magazine school, they said, write the personality of your magazine. I mean, you're really a person's inviting you to this in a sense.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of the feeling. Yeah.
And Nick Thompson is the new editor there, who had been a former editor at Wired, went to the New Yorker and came back. And, I think Wired has that, you're saying as a reader, you're a member of the club, and,
right.
and Wired definitely has that kind of cult following. And, it's a representative of who you are as a person. That is such a fun one to work on.
So what else?
We're also working on Glamour Women of the Year. We have a new editor there, Samantha Barry, who is a tour de force. She is wonderful. And she's really, kind of reimagining what this iconic, 26 years of Women of the Year, what we are participating with that team on. We have added a day of experiences to they have a summit, and then they have the Women of the Year awards, but we're adding this day of, and you can see that's our specialty.
Yeah, I can see this.
So we're taking, a group of women. They're learning how to do graffiti art by scaling the side of a building with these famous graffiti artists. We're taking another group to learn to do ballet with the American Ballet Theater. And we are taking another group shopping with Patricia Field. So it's this very, very immersive access that only Condé Nast can deliver. And then my third meeting of the day before I saw you at lunch was meeting on a brand new event that we're incubating called #FAM. And that one is fun because it's not an existing brand at Condé Nast, but it's a new experiential first brand that we've incubated. So we basically noticed a white space in the events world, which is there's not a lot of cool things for parents to do with their kids. And we were actually receiving a lot of interest from our clients for millennial parents, which is funny to think of millennials as parents. But
they are getting older.
They are. And they're having kids.
Yes.
And they want to do cool, enriching things with their kids. And they also want to retain their own identity while they're having, families. They don't want to just be mommy or daddy, and I think this is a dual audience, which is really interesting. Across Condé, we reach 60% of millennial parents, and they are a dual audience. And a lot of our brands, we're creating content for that audience. So what we're doing is we're hosting an event that has a place at the event for multiple brands, for Bon Appetit, for even Teen Vogue, for The New Yorker, how to talk to your kids about politics. So we're going event first, but we're launching a newsletter and a social handle and, other content elements to go with it. So that's a day in my life.
It's a flip side.
It's a reverse engineered brand,
right.
And starting with event first. So I think, for a lot of us out there that have lived and breathed events for a long time. I think, this idea of creating original IP in response to, identifying what's the white space in the events world? What is lacking? What are people craving? And then, creating distinct IP around it.
How did you get to that point? So you had the meeting today. Okay. It's already kind of baked out.
Yeah.
Like what is your brainstorming process and your at Condé Nast to actually say that this is a niche, this is the white space? How do you analyze the white space and make a decision?
Well, that's an amazing question. So we have a strategy team and we're really lucky. So we were charged with kind of being an incubator for what are some other ideas that we could come up with that might be independent of the brands. And that was such a fun, white blank canvas project.
Take us into that meeting. Like, okay. What does that meeting look like?
All right. So
and
it's
where
my
do you
crew.
Start?
So it's my crew. So
tell us how many people you have in your team.
All right. My team on any given day, because it does ebe and flow, we've got an army of freelancers that we kind of bring in. But I would say we've got a crew of about 15 people, combination of full-time and freelance.
And what do they do? What is their day job?
So I've got them kind of divided into 4 distinct groups. So I've got my, certainly my production and activation crew that is responsible for the building, but they're my P&L people. They're like, what is this going to cost? And how is this realistically going to get done? I have my editorial programming team, and that's a very important distinction for us at Condé. I have editors who specialize in putting people on the stage. And that's not always someone who wrote a great article, right? That there is an art form to that. It's almost a lot of, some of them have background actually in video. It's a casting, I have my production team. I have my editorial programming team. I have my sponsorship sales team, because nothing's happening if we're not finding, sponsors for it. They certainly come in towards the end if we say, is this a viable product? But then I have my consumer marketing ticket team. And that team has, strategists in it, where I kind of have them constantly. We're looking at data. We're looking at data of what is our audience consuming across the house. What are they gravitating towards kind of content space? And then they're looking just in the world at large. What is going on in the events world? And what is there lacking? Like what do people need? So we kind of came together and we actually had 10 ideas that we thought were these independent ideas that
you go off, everybody goes off to their own corner and come up with the 10 ideas.
Strategy team comes back first and they say, here's some trends we're seeing. So they come back and do trend reporting. Okay. And then we have, our creatives and the editorial programmers and the design people, they go off and they kind of are taking, and that's another sweet spot of Condé Nast, they're taking their editorial lens on the world. And they're like, here are the trends we're seeing because we're cool hunters. We combine data with gut, and that's the beauty of my job too.
And whose gut? Is it your gut?
Editorial gut.
It's all editorial gut, but I mean, the end of the day.
It's my gut. Who are we kidding?
Yeah.
Ultimately, of course. And I look at myself, I sit squarely between the edit and the business side. So I am taking in all of this data and I'm saying, are these trends coming through from the data side? Do they match up with what my editors are seeing? And is it sellable? And that's the 3-pronged, stool, which is, is this what consumers want? Is this, and I think in the old days, we would just, a lot of the editorial, we went on editorial gut only.
Right.
Well, now we have data, which is an incredible layer to put upon that. And I think data alone doesn't tell the full picture.
Right.
So you have your data layer, you have your edit layer, and then you have your sponsorship layer of, is this what clients are looking for? Because ultimately, and I'll tell you, this is a big shift at Condé Nast. Our events make money. They have to make money.
That's a huge shift, right?
Yeah.
That's a big
these are viable products.
These are not PR events.
No, and they're
anymore,
not added value, and they're not buzz events. They're not, look, the buzz has to be there. That's probably a 4th prong to the stool, that it has to make sense, and it has to be Condé caliber, and it has to kind of go along with the authority and the integrity and the influence that we are known for. So that's kind of the non-start, that's that's the baseline.
Now let's take a quick break and listen to a message from one of our fantastic sponsors, Leo Events. Planning an event and wondering how to ensure your attendees will have the best experience possible? Let Leo Events, an award-winning global events agency, help you create a spectacular meeting or event that will leave your guests cheering and wishing for more. When you're ready to follow the roar everyone is talking about, go to leoevents.com. That's leoevents.com. Okay, so we've got the ideas. You've come. You're at. Everybody went to their own table corners. They came back
and they pitched. We basically had each group put their kind of concepts together, and they pitched to me, but our entire group. And we have such a great team, and a lot of us have worked together for many years at various brands in and out of Condé. Like I'm not, I've done stints at the New York Times, at Fast Company. A lot of my team have backgrounds at those companies as well. So we've definitely been, we've expanded our horizons, but, so we come back together and we decide as a team. I think we got it down to 3 finalists. And then this was one that we felt, we took it to the industry teams, we took it to the editorial teams, and everyone unanimously loved it.
How disparate were the concepts? Were there 3 completely different concepts?
Yes, very different.
So you could have gone down any road.
Yep.
And you decided on this one because of the research.
Because of the research, and also, look, another layer of it is how, is this achievable? And in this, and none of our brands were parenting brands. None of our brands had, we were receiving that inbound request from the clients, and we definitely had solutions, but none was perfect. So it's giving my sales team a solution that they currently don't have. That's instead of giving them something else to sell, it was giving them a solution to possibly a challenge that they were having from the inbound. And that was hugely powerful. And it also was something that I wasn't stepping on any toes of my other editors, Right. I think they all were quite curious. Like if you look at Vogue and Teen Vogue was an example of taking a sub-audience of Vogue, right? So this is almost experimenting across the house. One of Bon Appetit's best performing videos is Kids Try. Okay. So that's a very kids focused, I think that we felt like, oh, that's it. That was one of my editorial trends. That's interesting. That's resonating with consumers, but it's a way for me to tap into that, but I'm not like taking anything away from that team. You know what I mean? So right. There were a lot of criteria that went into it to make this one, the one that we gave the green light to.
So for other people listening that are creating their new events, what advice do you give them then? And based on this, it seems like you have the certain principles that you've developed.
Absolutely. So in developing your own, I think you always have to start with a gut, but then, add to it real data and go out. And even if you have to do a survey monkey, like go get the data, because, and you and I were chatting about this earlier, I think that it's the way that experiences go right now. You need to listen. You need to, a lot of us feel like we've been doing this a long time and we know the way, but to just stop and really listen. And we even did further research. So for this particular audience, we developed a newsletter. So we went out and we don't have a ton of people yet on our newsletter. We just started, but we went out and we surveyed them. and we ask them what they're looking for in content. Because now that we know, okay, we're honing in. Now we know there's white space for this event, but what specifically should this event look like? Do you want to heavy up? Do you want to do cooking? Do you want thought leader seminars on how to raise kids during the Me Too movement? So we asked them some really, really specific questions. And I actually was really surprised. People, they don't.
Was that the definitive? I mean, there's a great book out called Google Sprint on how they were able to prototype something in 5 days.
Oh, wow.
And they ask 5 people, and they have the analytics say that you don't need to do many more than that in order to get something to see if it really works.
Yeah.
Where does when do you get it beyond your personal gut feeling to, okay, we're doing this?
Yeah. And we use both. So and actually members of my team, a lot of them are parents. So that's helpful. And I had 300 people in that survey response, which isn't a ton, but that's plenty.
It's enough.
It's plenty.
5 for a sprint.
Exactly. That's making me, the other day I was like, I only have 300, but now after hearing you say that, I'm like, we have plenty.
Exactly.
But it just helps you. And look, you're not living and dying, but you're like, that is my map. And you have to know the map. You might ebb and flow off of that path, but it gives you the guideposts,
Okay, so then so you've got the idea.
Yep.
Walk us through the execution phase and the actual event. Like, how much time do you take to create an event? Like, what is your plan? What is your process?
Do you want an ideal world?
Ideal world. Of course, there's never an ideal world, but
right. I'm incubating another project that I can't talk to you about, but it's super exciting and it's huge. And that roadmap is probably 18 months.
18 months.
But this project, we probably started with this one in March or April, and we're executing in December. So this one isn't an ideal scenario, but another layer of this is, and we all know this, okay? If you are out there actively seeking sponsors, you have 2 paths. You have the bigger guys who are going to take eons to make up their mind. And then you have some of these PR dollars or more opportunistic dollars. And guess what? These people are going to wake up after Labor Day and they are going to be ready to spend with me. And I know that having this event in December, I'm going to capture those. So you always have to be operating on those 2 levels where and this particular one, I didn't have a ton of time to talk to the larger people, but guess what? I had a conversation with a really huge, amazing company last week, and they want to talk about this for 2019. Wonderful. I'm going to talk to you about 2019 while I'm still in execution mode. And I'm going to talk to my more opportunistic people, and we're going to get this thing off the ground. Because sometimes, and this is a great lesson from, and another difference from old Condé, like, let's try this. It might not be perfect, but even the event itself is such a data exercise, right?
Right.
Like if people are really flocking to the food elements, that might end up being the entire event next year, And I think for all of us to kind of, I think in the event space, we all just want, perfection is expected, right? And flawless events. We're all programmed to do that and to ensure that. But let's just go out there and try some different things and be open to observing and saying what was resonating, because events are not one-offs. These are ongoing. You're either going to do a series of them or you're doing this annually. So I think we just need to take a longer lens, which, in our media landscape, we're so short-sighted sometimes. So, I think we can all give each other a break.
So do you think the appetite's there for not failure, but not succeeding? Or, in terms of not being the exact expectation that you have from the start of the plan, do you think that there's a little bit more tolerance for that?
You mean at Condé or in life in general?
In general, in terms of our business. Is it something that's shifting that we're allowed to experiment a little bit because no one knows the answer?
I think we should allow ourselves. I think as leaders in this field, we should allow ourselves and to say, look, we tried this and we're going to evolve and morph.
How many startups pivot?
Exactly. And that's why you have to look at these events especially, so look, I'm sure your audience is segmented, and a lot of what I'm talking about here, developing your own IP and all of this, and you're driving your own P&L. That's not everyone's goal. Right. A lot of people are doing just the brand building. But if you are out there and you are trying to drive a standalone business and you are driving consumer revenue and sponsor revenue, you have to start with a plan, move towards it, but allow yourself to pivot. And the other thing that, and I just said this in a meeting, a big corporate meeting meeting yesterday. At Condé Nast, we've always been very good at launching things and then maybe going in another direction. We need to launch things and grow them and have the patience for them to evolve. And you look at Coachella, how many years has that been going on? Even 29 Rooms, Albie, you talked to Albie, that thing started off as an experiment based on an event that they'd been doing in a mall. They launched it during Fashion Week. I guarantee you that thing was not making a ton of money year one. And look at it now and look at how, but they had the patience and the discipline to wait it out and see the long-term vision. So that's something I hope we can all do with each other and for each other,
Right.
So
let's move on to the user experience now. The audience, the various generational audiences, the types of things that you think they're attracted to. And we're going to get into the ice cream museum and your feelings about all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So how has it changed? I was at the Teen Vogue event. I was probably the oldest person there, but it was like taking a secret trip into the future.
Yeah.
It was so amazing. I talked about it incessantly to everybody that I saw for a month.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to hear that. And that was a project that our team incubated. We started in LA in December, and then we came to New York. So you attended the New York one, right?
I attended the New York one.
So that was another one, and that's another lesson. And we go out there and we say, and this is something we would have never done. I used to not be able to launch an event without knowing every person appearing, every single last detail. We went out with, here's a date. Here's a location. You love this brand. Tell us who you want to see. What topics do you want to cover? So a lot of this was just hearing back from this audience. And that's the beauty of Teen Vogue. It's a two-way conversation.
But isn't that the future? I mean,
that is the future.
If that's what they're growing up,
they're growing up.
They're going to be like the normal way that we behave.
Absolutely. And that should be, that's, I think, going back to, you said, what lessons? So start your concept with a gut feeling. This feels like it's a space that we should go into, and then start the surveying and start asking people, start finding out where your audience is and, asking them what they want to see. So in Teen Vogue, we really tried to mix up the content, the format. We know that, this audience, and obviously everything is a shareable moment, we'll get to the Museum of Ice Cream, et cetera, but you obviously have to have these Instagrammable moments. But guess what? Your lanyard, your name tag is an Instagrammable moment. Your food is. The location is a character in the play. The menu is a character in the play. Every activity you have, the downtime, the music. Like we could have gone with a DJ, but we had live music. We had all these young people coming to us and saying, we want to perform at the Teen Vogue Summit. And we were like, and I'll be honest with you, that brand, that was a very modest budget.
No,
so
I was very impressed that it wasn't produced to the nth degree, and that was perfectly fine for these kind of events.
Well, because guess what? It's the convening power of who you brought together in the audience and on the stage, right? So we had these great musicians, and they were like, we want to perform. I said, okay, great. It has to be acoustic, and you have to bring your own equipment. And they're like, we love it. Yes. And that's another one, the power of that brand is, we're not paying people to appear.
Right.
They believe in that brand. They believe in the mission of it. And it has, it's a mission-based brand. So people really believe strongly in it. So it's an easier lift to program that, obviously, but we covered everything at that event from, really, really tough topics, from gun control to sexual assault to.
That's Teen Vogue.
That is Teen Vogue.
That's so surprising.
Yes. And it was, there was a piece that was written about it, and it just said it's talking about the topics that everyone's afraid to talk about. And, look, that's sometimes scary as a marketer, and there were some people who were not up for those conversations. But when you're changing culture, you have to push forward.
We're going to take a little break and come right back after this message from Hilton. So when's the big event? Hilton's here for planners with their exclusive customized meetings. Become a wow maker and save time by letting Hilton help you present an extraordinary event, one that leads to memorable and meaningful connections. Visit meetings.hilton.com and let Hilton help you. I just got out of a meeting this morning about an event for the Olympics where they're actually focusing on all the problems with the Olympics, sponsored by the Olympics.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is sort of a change in terms of the attendee experience where they want a little bit more edge to what they experience. So you're finding that? Or?
Yeah. And so the first session that you saw, how much were they talking about brands? They were talking about, they were like, here are brands we like. Here are brands we don't like. Okay. I was sitting there going, oh gosh, please. But they were
in our day when they like talk about a brand, the guy's there, you want to kill yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to kill your brand.
I think this age, those millennials and the Gen Z, I'm calling them young millennials and Gen Z because it's we've already talked about the older millennials, but they're very comfortable talking about brands. And you know how you're talking about Vanity Fair becomes a badge of who you are.
Yeah.
They feel that way about brands. They're very open to, if they love a brand, they're going to live it. And if they don't love a brand, you're going to hear it and it's going to be all over. So I think brands, even like the Olympics, everyone, they can't shy away from these conversations.
And brands are people and people are fallible.
Yes.
And so they look at how they behave.
Yep. And as long as you can rectify something, as long as you handle it in the right way, then they're forgiving, you know?
How does all this translate into the actual experience? How do people, when they enter your ecosystem, how do they behave? Is it changed, or how do you want to make them feel?
Yeah, I mean, look, everything has to be interesting. This staying with Teen Vogue for a bit, just the bullshit detector is very high. So even if I have brands coming in that are like, I would like to do a lounge within a lounge, I say, okay, we're not doing that. Your brand is going to be hurt by that. Like, my job is to help you interpret your brand through this lens, right? So one of our great partners, Tom's. So Tom's is perfect for this audience, and Tom's invented mission-based retail. But we did something really, really cool with them. They're really getting behind Rock the Vote, or they partnered with Rock the Vote, and they're really getting behind voting for the midterms. They're not a brand that's shying away from any sort of activism, but they built like a faux kind of polling voting booth, and we did this kind of photo booth type thing where you're committing to vote. We were registering people to vote, but we also then shot a lot of great content there that they then went on and used across platforms at Condé. So I think, a partner like that, I don't need to steer them, but we collaborate with them and we say, and this was a really cool one. We had some of our editors talk about the importance of voting, which these are new days. They weren't talking about, I can't wait to put my Toms on and vote, but they were talking about the importance of voting and when you have like the marketers at Toms, they get it too. They don't want it to be an overly produced, phony kind of message. But we also took members of that audience. We looked at some of the people who had bought tickets, and we checked out some of their social followings, and we actually recruited them to come be a part of this branded content. And that's another thing as marketers, think about that. It's not just, hey, I'm filming what's on stage. Hey, I'm filming like B-roll. It's like, go look at who's coming and go find out and recruit, because I think we gave them a small stipend and we gave them some Toms. And these younger kids, they will participate if they like the brand and if they like some swag. And
there's no ethical issues with that anymore, is there?
Well, look, we were overt.
Yeah.
We were overt, and we actually were asking, and this is the difference. I wasn't asking them to go on and talk about how much you love Toms. I was saying, go talk about how important you think voting is. Keep the content real, keep it organic, and then the brand is in the background. And listen, that's a tough part of my job too. Going in and saying to someone, your brand is important, and but it can be in the background sometimes for you to have a more powerful impact. But
you think, in terms of the general attendee experience, the idea of brands and integrating life seems to be much more prevalent than it was in the past. That you're talking about the entire life.
Oh yeah,
no matter what brand it is, no wonder magazine it is or whatever event.
I think. Well, look, I think the millennials and Gen Z are way more comfortable with brands, and they're incorporating it into we are very specific about whether something is a branded programming session. We're not going to fake it. We don't do pay to play. If something is, we had the CEO of Lifeway, and she is a female CEO. She has a passion about, she is a sexual assault survivor. So she wanted to talk about how she brings her activism into her company. She had her daughter on stage with her, but we said, this is a sponsored session, right? So, but there's ways but that audience doesn't care. but as long as you are telling them.
Right.
So like, I think in the old days, it's either maybe a Gen X or a boomer audience might be like, ew, branded content. This audience, they're used to it. It's what they've grown up with. As long as it's good, just make it good.
Right.
But that's what we do. That's what how
do you deal with the editors that we're dealing with editors on that sponsored versus that's a whole nother podcast.
I'm never taking that idea to David Remnick, but I'm taking Phil Picardi because he, it was funny. Phil Picardi was one of the first editors. He went to VidCon a few years ago and he came back and he called me and he's like, Erica, I just had so many great ideas on the brands, things that we could do with brands. So I think that when you have a different, mindset of how you grew up with it and you think that brands are a representative of who you are, you're more comfortable with playing around with them. They just need to be the right brands.
Right. You need to make sure you're curating them properly.
Yes, it's curation. That is key. Yeah. And I think that even, look, I don't ever want, like I said, David Remnick should never be having that conversation. But, there are other brands that are not news, that in newsmaking or brands that are able to kind of play with that. And as long as it's a brand that the editors feel strongly about and can get behind, I think a lot of them are, more comfortable with having those conversations of let's just create. I mean, that's what our entire in-house agency. So my position is part of CNX, which is our in-house agency. And that's, all of our creative are editors, and that's what we do. They're former editors that now work at the agency. So it's the editorial lens on brands, and that's just where we all are as marketers. And the more we get comfortable with it, as long as our criteria is let's just create good shit, then everybody wins.
Right. So going into the experience of the attendee, where is the attention span of the attendee of our events today versus, because I noticed that you sit through long programs, you want to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Where are you in terms of retention span?
Yeah. And look, again, it's a different groups of people are different. The Wired Business Conference, I'm less concerned about that than obviously Teen Vogue. Although,
I don't know.
But
not
Teen Vogue,
a millennial, and I don't want to sit in boring long sessions.
It's so interesting. So some of the things we try to do in terms of format to mix it up and keep things moving. And the other challenge is not just attention span of the people sitting there, but how are you taking that content and having it be expressed digitally, right? Because no one's watching a 45-minute, and look, even TED Talks 17 minutes, even that's not.
What is your rule? What is your rule for social? What is your rule for how much time on a sizzle reel even? I mean,
my God, a sizzle reel has to be under 3 minutes. I mean, 2 minutes is ideal. But all right, two different things. In terms of format, one thing we've been experimenting with is, and I actually did this at Fast Company where we started it. But so you're having a panel, you've got 4 people on it. You've got a moderator, you're having your pre-meeting with your panel speakers. And, we did this at Fast Company. We said, we're going to tell a story up there. We're not going to have this rambling conversation where maybe 2 people are going to take over, another 2 people are never going to speak. And so we're going to tell a story. The moderator, the editor is going to start the story off by setting it up, just as a journalist would do. And then we're going to hand the baton to each of you to tell your story in 2 to 3 minutes, tell your chapter. And then at the end, we're going to have a free-flowing conversation and a Q&A. That sets you up for different chapters that you can put up digitally or socially that, people might end up watching them all back to back, but there's just something psychologically that makes those bites feel more, tangible. We also are playing around with a format now where we invite a number of people to speak on the same, maybe ask them the same question, but give them a time constraint, right? Of and they can express themselves.
Publicly.
Yeah. But at an event, ask people to express themselves in any way that they want, but give them a time constraint. And then you can control that, how that is shared digitally. So, I think there's a couple tricks you can do, but think of Teen Vogue Summit. Those sessions, they were 30 minutes. This is another approach. So, we had that captive audience, we had 30-minute panels, but what we did, we had our car wash, right? So we had the people, we had Emma Gonzalez, Rowan Blanchard on stage. They did a 20-minute session shooting the shit, going back and forth, 2 girls talking about issues that mattered in their lives, everything from shopping to gun control. And then they get off stage We had an incredible still photographer. We shot gorgeous portraits of every single person there. Then we took them to a different room. They did a video shoot with our video team. They did that. So we're just getting better about making use of those people's times, right? And then we rotated them, and then we had a press moment where we allowed press to come speak to them. And our green rooms are amazing. And we don't spend a ton of money on them. They're not amazing in terms of overly expensive, but we create a space in this green room. It's big. We have makeup touch-ups, all of that. We have a ton of great food. We have a ton of great swag bags. We make it a place that people want to hang out and stay, and while we're also creating content. So I think look, I have to constantly be thinking of where content's being created at every given moment of this event.
I mean, that's your biggest influencers are sitting back there, and they're going to tell everybody about the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a brilliant idea.
Yeah. It's our car wash, and we want to create events that people don't just pop in and leave, and we even had these moments backstage where like Al Gore is chatting with Emma Gonzalez, and it's just that's where the magic really happens. So we've in recent years put a lot more thought into those green rooms and how they can work harder for us. Did
those kind of social have more people watching than sort of the traditional content? I mean, the sort of the untouched moments, the sort of the unexpected moments seem to be. It sounds like it would be logical that people really want to see that.
They're pretty magical. People, they want it all. They want to see what, but it goes to this. They want to see what happened, but then they want to see the behind the scenes. And then the other beauty of creating these gorgeous portraits was that every single person who appeared loved these portraits so much that they then shared it. And then when you have, look, we're not paying these folks. We're not asking them to post X number of times, but we're giving them assets.
So you're memorializing the moment.
Yes. And that wasn't too costly. And, the beauty of Teen Vogue is we had an amazing up and coming photographer. So it wasn't like we didn't, Vanity Fair's done that model with Annie Leibovitz and, all of that. It's a little different. You could do it on a low scale or put a cool filter or do something, make your Instagram moment for your attendees. It should be very different from your shareable moment for your talent,
That is a great idea.
Yeah.
That is really good. So let's, as we sort of wind this down a little bit, the taste, events are fashion in a sense, what people are going to. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about the ice cream museum. Where do you think the trends are going in terms of what people want to experience and what are transformational and what isn't anymore?
Yep. So we had a meeting yesterday, kind of, we're working on a big kind of beauty project. And I think everyone is like, look at BeautyCon and look at, 29 rooms. And I do feel that the cons and the Instagram moments are kind of, obviously ultra saturated. What did I tell you? I saw a museum of selfies. And, it's the end, people.
It's over.
It's over. Oh my God, my feed is Candytopia and, all of this. So, and look, we love that and it's fun but it doesn't really stay with you and it doesn't, it's a moment and it doesn't necessarily transform you.
Cotton candy.
Absolutely. So I think, this idea of transformation, and transformation can come in a lot of forms. I went to this really cool thing the other night where it was a correlation between music and wine, in that the same place in your brain kind of processes each of these experiences. So they played a type of music and you took a sip of wine and it tasted one way, and then they played a different type of music and you tasted the same wine and it tasted completely different. And I left that transformed. Yeah. So transformation can take a lot of different forms, but you go into, I'm never going to be drinking wine and not listening to the music, but, really, really educating people, enlightening them. But I do think a physical transformation is something that we're really intrigued by, and also participatory. So I have the, great pleasure of working with so many interesting partners, from, the Rockwell Group to Punch Drunk, people behind Sleep No More, and, a lot of really amazing partners, that I have access to. And we're all kind of playing around with this idea of participation, because look, the Instagram moment where the backdrop is the star, like now it's the consumer, the attendee themselves is the star. And perhaps that's the canvas, is the person. And
is it physical? Physical gameplay also is becoming more important than ever.
Yep.
Are you seeing that in terms of what people want to do?
Oh yeah. I mean, look, I think, VR is so tricky. We need to solve this. We see that people want to be together. So let's solve these virtual experiences. If they can incorporate groups and if people can be together and do these things together, that's where everyone will win. But I think look at the Westworld at South by. Like, people were transported into this other world, and that was done in a physical manner and a very expensive manner. But, I think that's obviously where things are going. But I like the idea of like the face as the canvas. And I like the idea of participatory, of kind of forgetting, your own life for a while and immersing yourself and becoming a part of a different narrative.
It sounds like you're also doing that with, bringing people to office settings, and you're sort of breaking out of the four walls of an event mode.
Yeah, and I think, going back to, all right, so the trend all over our editorials, real stories, real imagery, real beauty, right? So bringing people behind the scenes to real experiences. And, there's a magic of seeing how people create and how they work and where they're inspired by and how their lives kind of unfold, and stepping foot inside of those lives is really exciting. So,
I mean, also I'm seeing, and maybe you're seeing that I'm seeing 26-year-old, 27-year-olds that are the ultimate foodies, and they're connoisseurs of how to do things with high quality. They're sick of crappy stuff.
Oh yeah.
And they really appreciate the finer things at a very young age. It took me probably 40 years to get to the point where I appreciate, the greatest food in the world,
right?
Or the greatest restaurant experience, or the tasting menu, or something like that.
Yeah.
And these 26-year-olds and 27-year-olds are like expecting it,
right?
So
and
the
that's
bar
what's
is high.
exciting. That's because it's like what's coming up next. But we even have we have Gourmet Takes, which is a video series of we have this amazing chef from Bonap who recreates the Cheeto in a gourmet way, or Cheez-Its in a gourmet. So it's pretty fun.
But the taste buds, the idea that quality and people won't accept crap.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
are you seeing that? You can't you can't do anything. Even Teen Vogue, you could be inexpensive, but it has to have quality.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good lesson for everybody, because it doesn't require writing big checks. It's just the thoughtfulness and I hate to use these marketing words like authenticity, but it's true. It needs to ring true, because the bullshit meter is high and they will go directly to social, and you are, you're in trouble.
David Stark says that the ultimate the ultimate sort of game changer is ingenuity. Mm-hmm. And I believe that. And that's not necessarily budget.
No. It's just being, it's goes back to the conversation with Albie. It's like pushing each other forward. It's what's next. Yes. And that's what we are as these event people. We're just always dreaming of how can we do it bigger? How can we do it better? How can we do it smarter? How can we take this and twist it and make it more fascinating and more appealing? And I think the good news is we've got all of these incredible consumers that they're ready for it. They're ready to come along for the ride of whatever we can dream up. And that's what makes this truly is the golden age of what we do. You've seen it through so many different cycles. So have I.
Yeah, no, it's incredible.
And it's I feel so lucky. We talked about, I went through this period where, I would be like, I do events, and people are like, oh, that's so cute. You're a party planner. That must be so fun. Or I'd be going to do a big event. Like I'm doing the Oscar Green Room, and people are like, have fun. I'm like, I'm not attending this thing as a guest. Okay. I'm not George Clooney sitting in it. I am building it, and the stakes are so high and I'm freaking out. But now it's become and that's why we call it the fancy word of experiential, but I'm VP of experiential for Condé Nast. People are like, that is amazing, and we really are so lucky to be kind of living through this part where we can, make all of these dreams come true for these very avid, fans that are just waiting for our next move.
Okay. As we end,
yes.
I want to, your VP of experiential, take us back to your youth. And when did you discover that this was in your DNA? High school, college?
Oh, it started younger. Well,
elementary school.
You have to understand my mother is the queen of every holiday. So every holiday as a kid was a huge production that was, menu and ambiance and music and costumes and then I got my first kind of gig as an event planner, party planner. Joking. As my sister was 6 years younger than me, and I was the chief creative officer of all of her birthday parties. And
you were the VP of Experiential.
Yes, I was. And I did all these elaborate things. And I mean, such a, so I got addicted to the applause of like, another flawless event executed. But it was, someone had asked me, what was your biggest influence? And my first concert ever was Prince Purple Rain tour with Sheila E. and the Glow in the Dark drumsticks. And then I remember going to like the Flaming Lips concerts. And I just, there was a magic in making this, the fantastic, something that seemed like a fantasy happen in real life that was so special and it exceeded your expectations, and I think that's what got me hooked on that feeling of just dreaming things up and like, actually having the privilege to make them happen and really surprise people and, leave them feeling something and being transformed. And so that's where
Here you are.
Here I am.
Here you are.
With you.
VP of Experiential.
At Condé Nast and the podcast studio with the famous David
office.
Adler.
Yes. And thank you to BizBash. You guys have always been, you've always been such a great fan of ours, but also a great resource of ours. And, we tap into you guys all the time. So
we love this business. And we think that we're talking about the white space, the white space of our industry is really where ideas happen. I mean, the idea of the break room, or the breaks at a conference, or the waiting online for a ticket, or waiting for the show to start, or talking to the guest next to you. Your life could change if you participate in those types of experiences in a real way.
Yep. And another mistake we've made in the past is like the over programming. Don't underestimate the time that people want to spend together.
Yep.
Because if you're doing things right, the person sitting next to you is as fascinating as the person on the stage. So you want to give that time for connection. I mean, that was another thing, we should do another session on failures and lessons from that because we got plenty.
Well, let's end right there and we'll do it for the next time.
All right, good.
David, we're back in our studio and Erica named a specific and unique objective of Condé Nast events, which I found really interesting. And she said that's pushing the culture forward. It makes sense for that company. And it's also a really smart framework to guide decisions related to their events. So I think the lesson here for our listeners is to really think about what's the goal of your event? What's the bigger mission? And then map out how you achieve it from there.
I think purposefulness is still becoming the big thing. I mean, what is the thing that really will make people, move the mountain, will move the needle, whatever the cliche that you want. And I think that events are doing it. And I think that Erica and her team are really, really thinking about which directions that we need to go.
Yeah, you really need to drive down into it. You don't just have an event because it's the event we've had every year.
Oh, no. It's like, what can we do differently as opposed to this is what we did last year?
And how is this event going to change things?
Absolutely. Purpose, impact, all of those great words that they're living really at Condé Nast. And Condé Nast is one of the leaders in this field. They have been innovating and doing things in the print world and doing things in the event world that have actually for years they've been doing things in the event world. So they're really not new to the game.
So I was really amused by when she was talking about the saturation of Instagram bait events, these museums of like the Color Factory, Museum of Ice Cream.
I love her opinions on
Museum
this.
of Selfies. There are countless others. And after my editorial team covered these initial entrants and the first rounds of these and then kind of the iterations of them and how they've moved forward. We're cooling off a bit on them too, but the interesting thing is they are still massively popular.
Absolutely.
It's been fascinating to see event entrepreneurs decide to fill in that space and they're accessible maybe to the general public in a way that a Wired Business Conference isn't. So I guess that put a pin in that one. We'll see. Are we talking about these a year from now? Are people still posting about these a year from now? But it was an interesting thing.
It's always interesting, Beth, when we hear about the trends and, that trend is over. But then the rest of the world is absolutely on fire about those things that are supposedly not cool anymore.
Right. So I guess things can be popular with the general public and maybe no longer pushing culture forward.
Exactly.
It's important that somebody else is thinking about what that next thing is going to be, though.
So, Beth, what's going on at BizBash?
It's fortuitous that we had Erica on today because she is speaking at BizBash Live New York. The show is October 24th at the Javits Center, and she's appearing as part of our Event Innovation Forum, where we will have speakers talking on a host of important and interesting subjects. So register for that at bizbash.com/events to also learn more about Erica and about our other amazing speakers as part of, again, the forum, also our workshops and our new master classes. All of that you can find on our website.
While the event is fantastic, just hearing Erica is worth the time to attend. She is really spectacular. I could have talked to her for hours and hours and hours. So before we end, I want to thank the people that made this podcast possible. And let's start with Dave Nelson, our producer, and Claire Hoffman, who creates the content, makes the content ready to go. And also Rebecca Pappas, who is in charge of the distribution. I also want to ask people if they have a chance to, if they like this podcast, to actually give us some kudos on the site and give us a compliment or give us a review. Thank you so much for that.
And I'll just add one more thing. We recently had our Chicago Hall of Fame event for our BizBash Hall of Fame. We had it at the Field Museum in Chicago. And one of our Gather Geeks listeners came up and said hi to me and said it's fun to put a face with a voice. So hi, I'm so glad you're listening. And, it's another great example of how live events bring people together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Beth. And what do we say now?
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on.
Gather Geeks is sponsored by Leo Events. Need help executing a one-of-a-kind experience that will leave attendees wishing for more? Leo Events is an award-winning global events agency that excels in exceeding clients' expectations and creating remarkable moments. When you're ready to follow the roar, visit leoevents.com.